Welcome to the New York Times. It's such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. You, Chef Jose, are the child of nurses. Your parents worked in a hospital. They took care of people.
Yeah, they did.
And at some point, you decided that it wasn't enough to just build a successful restaurant chain. You wanted to go out and feed the world, feed people who had experienced disasters. And in a way, you continued that family tradition in a different way, taking care of people in a different way. Was there a turning point? Was there a moment when you said, oh, it's not enough to be a chef, I must do something else?
Yeah, well, my father will always try to feed everybody in the hospital on Sundays. He will invite everybody, and he'll never keep a tab of who he was inviting. And my mother was always asking, like, who is coming? I don't know. Sometimes we're 10, sometimes we're 50. My father always said, you know what thing? If more people come, just we add more rice to the pot. My father had very simple solutions for sometimes where he looked big problems. I think what Central Kitchen very much is what it is. What I saw was Katrina. We all saw Katrina. I remember the Superdome. I'm still thinking why I didn't go. You know what the Superdome is, what an arena is? You're gonna have it wrong. Everybody thinks an arena is a place where you go to see your NBA or NFL team play, or musicians. No, it's a gigantic restaurant that entertains with the sports. We were supposed to be feeding everybody within 6 hours at the Superdome, and we didn't. So all these moments I began following, and I saw that sometimes food is an afterthought in emergencies. And Haiti happened 2010. I'm in Cayman Islands, and I was watching the images we all saw, the hundreds of thousands of death and destruction. And I said, you know one thing, I've seen the power of food, working in an NGO since I was 23. This is Central Kitchen, one of the best food kitchens you can see anywhere in the world. I invite you to visit if you're in DC. So I gained the experience of the power of food to help a community. But then, in that emergency, I began thinking, what if cooks like me, we go and we try to feed somebody? I went to Haiti and I began the learning, which I think I'm still in the learning process.
It was after the earthquake.
Of how we can show up in an emergency and put the resources that the food industry has to bring relief with the urgency of yesterday. Not in a week, not in a month, but today. And that's how the idea of World Central Kitchen began.
So Katrina, really a turning point, watching it, Haiti, the earthquake, was where you put it into action for the first time. Since then, how many people have you served?
Well, it's been hundreds and hundreds of millions of meals, but obviously the biggest one, you know, we've been in Dorian, remember Bahamas? 14 islands, total destruction. We reached 80,000 meals a day within 10 days, over 2 million meals. 6 helicopters, 1 boat with 2 helipads, because there was not airports. 6 helicopters, how do you reach 14 islands far away from the capital, Nassau? 2 seaplanes. We were dropping in many places. Why we did it? Because everybody says, oh, brilliant. How you got helicopters? I'm like, well, it's not really brilliant. It's the only way to do it. Ukraine, we arrived. We reached 1.5 million meals. We were able to partner with 500 restaurants. It's smart because if the restaurants are shut down, I don't have to open a new kitchen in the middle of a park. I only need to reopen the restaurants are closed. People want to help. You're supporting them with help, with money, but with infrastructure. Before you know, you are feeding hospital shelters, all the refugee centers that were being opened in La Viv, in Kiev, and every city. Before we knew, we were delivering food in 9,000 points a week in more than 990 cities in Ukraine. Now we're not doing 1.5 million meals anymore, but we reached 240 million meals in Ukraine.
You are a veteran of the food industry, which contributes to the problem of climate change. What can restaurants do to reduce their negative impacts? You know, what are some practical things that you've seen restaurants do, including your own restaurants? You know, for example, people talk about encouraging plant-based meals, right? What kinds of things are practical, are realistic from the restaurant business point of view?
You're asking me from the restaurant, and it's true. We all can and we should be doing more. Listen, I have restaurants right now that they have charcoal. I'm using charcoal to grill the meat, and we're going through thinking process exactly what it means. But the complexity of the problem is bigger than that. Obviously, we can be going to what restaurants like mine can do in New York, in Washington, in Miami. But it's not like I want to escape your question. I only want to bring it to what is a bigger problem, which is over 3 billion people, mainly women, feed themselves every day with charcoal and fossil fuels. They don't do it like you and me because we can afford it on a Sunday when we want to show to our friends we are great grill masters. But they do it because it's the only way they can feed themselves. In the process of feeding themselves, they are becoming poorer because they are cutting trees. But it's not like, take a look what happened in Dominican Republic and Haiti, which is a case study of biblical proportions. One island full of trees, they have gas, implemented gas many years ago. One island that has no trees, right in the same big island. But the problem is that families become poorer because when they make $2 a day, and the charcoal to feed the family that they cost them 20, 30 cents, it's like 15, 20% of their salary. To be poor is expensive. We don't spend 10, 15, 20% on the fire to feed our families. So it makes the communities poor. Mm-hmm. They keep doing deforestation. Young girls don't go to school because they send them to pick up wood. Young girls don't go to school, so they don't receive education. And youth poverty keeps happening. At the end of the day, we need to be investing massively in the years to come to make sure that those 3 billion people on planet Earth can move from fossil fuel cooking to a cleaner technology. This investment must be done, or climate change will never change, because this is a very important part of the issues we're facing.
Because you brought up cooking stoves, I must ask you, how do you feel about the gas versus electric cooking stoves debate?
Well, I got in the middle myself, and again, problems are highly complex, and much of the talk sometimes just happen in tweets and nonsense here and there. Obviously, we all need to be doing more and investing in how we can do it in the cleanest possible way. But even sometimes people that think that they are doing the best they can, look at, this is perfectly clean, and this, we're all drinking water that is amazing. I love Fiji water, and I always say, Fiji water, local water from planet Earth. I have no problem with Fiji water, but we are all drinking water from, how many of you didn't drink a water that came from thousands and thousands of miles from where we are? How many of us, we've done trips? We need to start having a more pragmatic conversation about the way, obviously, we are feeding the world, but all of a sudden, just to make it black and white, is not, because also we cannot afford to be wrong. If we are going in the wrong direction and we bet everything in one direction, I'm very afraid that once we go in that direction, we are even making the problem.
So if I understand you correctly, don't focus on just this one thing. There are bigger issues. But you personally, do you prefer gas over electric, or are you agnostic?
I love gas.
Okay.
But I'm already 53 and I've been cooking like 38 years. And older people, as my daughter says, have a harder time to change. But listen, when I was working already very young in Spain, we were using already some of the early electrical cooking, and we were doing amazing high-end cooking. Offshore is doable, but also we need to be asking ourselves, where is this electricity coming from?
Sure.
Is that electricity source coming from also clean sources? Because that electricity we are producing is not coming from clean sources. What do you care if you are using electricity or not? So it's kind of not black and white. Everything has its angles, but do we need to learn more and listen to the experts, not to the politicians, to the experts, that they are going to enrich our knowledge so we can all be more informed and keep moving in the right direction? Yes, we need to be listening to the experts.
Okay. I'm going to come back to this question of the food industry and its impacts on both emissions, climate emissions, but also biodiversity, right? Is it possible to change, your supply chain, to look at where your cacao is coming from for your chocolate pudding, to see if it's not deforesting? Is it possible to support farmers that are doing sustainable practices? And is that realistic when you're running such a large operation like World Central Kitchen? Are those kinds of targets realistic?
Has to be, it's exhausting. Has to be exhausting for all of us. It's like you're eating and you're feeling guilty. If you're a Christian Catholic like me, well, Sunday you go to church, you ask for forgiveness, and Monday you go to be guilty again. But we need to be careful because we have a planet that is going ever hungry. Remember the quinoa craziness. How many here ate quinoa in the last 10 years? Yeah, thank you, because you put farmers high up in the mountains in Peru and quinoa places. I'm hungry because we were all buying quinoa and paying top dollars for it. And all of a sudden, these people that their economy and their eating habits include quinoa that was affordable, the prices went skyrocketing. All of a sudden, the people couldn't even afford their own quinoa because we were eating in New York with avocado. Which quinoa and avocado were like, shit, we've never been together. What happened? Well, some great chef in New York put them together, and it's a party. So you see, all these decisions are really generating, but then we go to the same, right? If you are in New York, and you're talking about climate and not adding extra CO2 into the atmosphere, should we be eating chocolate coming from the forest in Brazil?
Well, that's my question.
If we are really like the Pope, like I'm gonna be more shit. We should be eating whatever Manhattan can produce. We should feed New York with whatever Central Park produces. So that's why we need to be very, very, very pragmatic and also very careful on the big statements. Because to feed the world is a serious business. Right now we are talking about waste. And I'm very worried that very soon we're not going to be talking about waste. We're going to be talking that there is not enough food to feed the world. And nobody's thinking about that. So I don't know if you saw, but I kind of supported a company called Good Meat, which we are producing chicken cells in a lab. And everybody's like finger pointing at me, you're the demon. I like good chickens. But this is another way of forming and producing protein.
This is
going to be using less water. It's lab-based. At the end, I am a guy that supports any initiative. That you're supporting some of the big companies that they need to feed the world doesn't mean we don't need to be supporting the small farmers that they deserve all our support. If we are giving subsidies to the very big companies, I want to serve a burger for 90 cents, but I can't. I don't know how. McDonald's knows very well how, the benefit from the subsidies that the corn industry receives. So I'm saying, let's make sure that the way our government operates and through the Farm Bill and the way we are supporting the way we feed America and we feed the world, let's make sure that it is not making others poorer in a way that almost sometimes it looks like the farmers that feed America, it seems sometimes they cannot feed themselves. And this is a conundrum we need to resolve.
Excellent that you brought up the Farm Bill. It's under discussion. Again, what are the main things in your view that can address climate change in the Farm Bill?
Well, on the farm, obviously on the Farm Bill point, what I'm really worried when I mention, obviously, in the way the subsidies, that they are only benefiting a whole bunch of very big companies. And much of everything we see is not really trickling down into all the small farmers of America. And we see small farmers of America are really having a hard time. In the way we are right now producing with all the fertilizers, and right now we are having a huge issue on fertilizers and the mass production we're doing, the way we are using the land the way we are affecting the waterways. Take a look what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico. Any one of you has been there lately? I was walking in the beaches of Fort Lauderdale, and there was millions and millions of fish that were all dead because the way we keep producing food in America and other parts of the world keeps going down and in the waterways, ends in the sea, and is creating these huge problems in huge spaces of water, generating huge problems. So for me, the Farm Bill, which is one of the most powerful farm bills, is going to have to look very, very, very hard in the way the money is not thrown into the problem to help some few companies just to keep producing and producing without seeing sometimes the lateral negative effects it's creating, but start creating a farm bill that actually can make not only America healthy, but in the process we produce the food can be making America cleaner.
There's also national dietary guidelines coming out soon. Do you think that national dietary guidelines should include information, some guidance on meat and dairy?
Well, the dietary guidelines, what cannot be is used a political thing that people, Republicans, throw to Democrats and sometimes vice versa. You remember the pyramid itself, right? Then what changed to the My Plate. And I don't know if you remember the My Plate, but you see a percentage is vegetables, a percentage is fish, and a percentage is meats. And very much everybody agrees on the percentages. But then when you go to the Farm Bill, the way our government is spending the money, it doesn't support the My Plate. So one way to be solving many of the issues America faces is that the Farm Bill really puts the money in every one of the spaces in the My Plate. That will mean more vegetables, more fruits. That means support more of the small farmers. This is a great way used to make America healthier. It's a great way to invest food into rural America that sometimes is getting poorer and poorer. This is a great way used to start using American tax dollars in a smarter way. The My Plate and the Farm Bill are so far away from each other. They need to be mirroring each other.
Have you, as you've learned about the climate crisis, have you changed the way you eat? Have you changed what you cook, either at home or in your restaurants?
Well, I have a vegetable book. I'm selling it. Vegetables Unleashed. I open a vegetable concept called beefsteak. I know some people tell me it's a very bad name. But I was fascinated with the tomato beefsteaks. I think you Americans, English Shakespeare is fascinating. So beefsteak is a vegetable fast food restaurant. I opened the first one in George Washington, D.C. We opened up to 10, 12, and the pandemic came. The concept was not totally perfect. I decided just to bring down the number of venues, and we are reinvesting money in having more of these beefsteaks where you're going to have an amazing bowl of vegetables, of fruits, that they're local, that they're super tasty, and I hope I'll be successful. If not, I'm not successful, it's many other companies, like the Sweet Green Boys. I'm very happy because those are Washington guys. They began the first Sweet Green in Washington. Even people like Cava, I'm very happy because they also came from Washington. Washington is becoming a town that has done amazing fast food restaurants that they are or vegetable-based or lean very heavily on grains.
So you're trying to go in this space. How about personally? Are you changing the way you
In my house, if you come, you'll see more vegetables than I mean. I look like an Alice Water without hair, because number one, I'm always scared that Alice Waters may be coming into the door, and if everything I have in my kitchen is not local, she's gonna crush me. She's gonna crucify me, and this, I swear to God, that happens. And when she comes to my restaurant, it's like, where is this asparagus from? I mean, oh my God, if it's from Oregon, I throw the asparagus away. I don't want her to see it. I don't want them to see it, but this is important. And going to the fridge, this goes to a documentary we did with Andrew Zimmern, that we rented the kitchen in the Senate. And we went into the kitchen in the Senate, into the fridge, and we saw where all the boxes were coming from. And we went back to the farm where they came from. And you know what we realized? Even I know this is not about the climate, but it's about the climate, that every single person involved in those vegetables, they were all undocumented immigrants. The big lie is that our senators and congressmen are being fed by the undocumented of the world, but our senators and congressmen don't want to give them immigration reform, so they belong to America. That's climate change.
I just want to close with one question, please. In all the work that you've done with survivors of disasters, what is the one lesson that you would leave us with about how to survive? Could even be a recipe.
Well, I have a book that is today, it's not mine, but it's number 3 on the New York Times best-selling books list. Boom.
It's the World Central Kitchen cookbook.
And the lesson is that, and maybe it's one of the reasons I keep going back to some of these missions, is that in the worst moments of humanity, the best of humanity shows up. So don't lose faith. Inside us, actually, we're very good people. We only need to show it more.
Chef José Andrés, thank you very much.